I spent a decade bullying the Vance family's heir, relying entirely on our childhood sweetheart status. Who could have predicted that the very day after he went abroad, I'd be exposed as a fake heiress and kicked out of my home overnight? Later, at the true heiress's birthday banquet, the newly returned Carter Vance confessed his love on the spot. The surrounding crowd was moved to tears, but the very next second,
Wait.
"Who the hell are you? Where is Chloe? Thanks for asking. I'm currently busy selling corn dogs at the night market." When Carter found me, the night market was at its absolute peak. The streets of the old downtown district were packed with people, bustling with noise, and thick with the smoky scent of street food. He was wearing a custom-tailored three-piece suit, a pair of thin-rimmed glasses resting on the bridge of his nose. As a wealthy heir pampered since birth, every single strand of his hair was styled to perfection. He looked completely and utterly out of place in this gritty night market. "Chloe." He stared at me in sheer disbelief. I glanced up at him, not surprised in the slightest. "Oh, you're back?" Then, I lowered my head and expertly flipped a sizzling corn dog on the grill. "I'm a bit swamped right now. No time to catch up."
Just give me a minute.
Hearing this, he instinctively frowned, then raised his voice. "Chloe, I didn't even look up. Corn dogs are $3 for one, $5 for two. How many do you want?" Silence hung in the air for 2 seconds before he choked out a single sentence.
2.
"You got it." 2 minutes later, the two of us were squatting behind my food cart, eating corn dogs. The pampered young heir had probably never eaten anything this cheap in his life. After one bite, his brows knitted together in disgust, but when he met my gaze, he obediently swallowed it down. He looked like a pathetic, kicked puppy. Meanwhile, I scarfed down my corn dog in 3 bites and turned around to get back to the grind. "Chloe," he called out to me again. I turned to look at him. "What?" He stared at me earnestly. "I went to your house to find you. You weren't there." "Oh, right. I haven't had the chance to tell you. I left the Sterling family." I thought for a moment, then asked, "Did you see Riley?"
Yeah.
"Is she pretty?" Carter frowned slightly. The gentlemanly upbringing he'd received since childhood prevented him from insulting a girl. So he simply mumbled, "She's all right, I guess." After a pause, he added, "But she's not as pretty as you." I nodded. "All right, keep this in mind. She is the true heiress of the Sterling family. She's the one who is supposed to grow up with you. She had a really hard life all these years and finally made it back home. You need to treat her well. At the very least, don't make an enemy out of her because of me. That way, you won't end up with that tragic ending again." With that said, I turned to leave. But I couldn't move. I sighed in exasperation. "What is it now, Your Highness? You said that if I came back, you'd agree to be my girlfriend." Carter gripped my arm tightly and blinked. His eyes instantly turned red, looking exactly like a wronged golden retriever. Does that still count? Only then did I remember. Back when Carter was refusing to study abroad, I might have promised him a few things just to coax him onto the plane. Carter and I were childhood sweethearts. Relying on that status, I had bullied him for over a decade. He was the dignified heir of the Vance family, sitting at the absolute pinnacle of high society, yet he always followed my every command. Back then, I treated Carter like he belonged to me. But who could have imagined that in just 2 short years, the gap between us would become as vast as the sky and the dirt? But this was an ending I had anticipated a long time ago. "It doesn't count anymore." I reached out and gently pried his fingers off my arm. Meeting a gaze that looked like he was about to burst into tears at any second, I lowered my eyes. "Carter, we aren't equals anymore. So, in this life, you need to live well. In my previous life, my ending was incredibly tragic. From the day Riley returned to the Sterling family, I became obsessed with making her life miserable. Relying on my status as the Vance family heir's childhood sweetheart, I did everything in my power to sabotage her. In the end, everyone turned their backs on me. The Sterling family, having finally reached their breaking point, joined forces and threw me into a psychiatric hospital. Riley, on the other hand, went from an innocent little flower to the beloved darling of the Sterling family. Later, She voluntarily broke off her engagement with Carter and slapped everyone in the face by marrying a shrewd, capable uncle. She ended up having triplets in one pregnancy and became the absolute treasure of the dance family's true patriarch. Riley and I were like two sides of a mirror in a trashy billionaire romance novel. One fell from grace to total abandonment, the other rose from the ashes too. Ultimate glory. It was as if we were just blindly following a script from beginning to end. Only Carter stood firmly by my side. He defied his engagement for me. He publicly went to war with the elders and his family multiple times and treated his actual fiancée, Riley, with nothing but cold disdain. Because of that, his position as the heir was snatched away. He went from the golden boy of the dance family to an outcast eventually. On the day I was dragged off to the asylum, he died in a horrific car crash while trying to save me. He could have had a wonderful life, carefree, wealthy, and perfectly happy, if it hadn't been for me. So, when I was reborn, I didn't hesitate to persuade Carter to study abroad, and on the day I was exposed as a fake heiress, I didn't fall to my knees and beg the Sterlings to let me stay. Instead, I took my severance check, packed my bags, and left cleanly. This time, I didn't want Carter to see any of my misery or humiliation. I would rather remain in his memories as the bright, arrogant Chloe he grew up with, his proud childhood sweetheart. I changed into my uniform and stepped out of the locker room. My part-time job tonight was as a bottle service waitress at a high-end private club. In the past, as the eldest daughter of a Sterling family, I used to frequent this place with other rich kids. But this was my first time being here, as the help the manager sent me to deliver drinks to a VIP room. The moment I pushed the door open, the first person I saw was Riley, just like in my past life. She sat in the center of the crowd wearing a pristine white dress surrounded by admirers. According to the timeline, she had fully adapted to high society. By now, relying on her innocent and kind personality, she had won the approval of the Sterling family and was their undisputed little princess. Sitting next to her was a crowd of familiar faces, all my former wealthy playmates. I frowned slightly, kept my head down, and walked in. I originally just wanted to drop off the liquor and slip out unnoticed, because I had much more important things to do tonight. But as I turned around, someone recognized me. Chloe? The guy who spoke happened to be holding the microphone. As his voice echoed, the entire room fell dead silent. Everyone's eyes locked onto me.
It really is you.
The guy chuckled, as if he had just found a hilarious new toy. When did our great Miss Sterling become so pathetic? The moment he said that, laughter erupted across the room. Figures. A fake is still a fake. Hilarious. I can't believe she actually fell this hard. The rich kid who spoke first, Chase, leaned in close to Riley and sneered.
See, Riley?
I told you Chloe was inferior to you in every way. Carter only plays nice with her because they grew up together. Don't worry. Give it some time, and he'll naturally fall for you. Riley glanced in my direction and spoke in a timid, soft voice. But I think Carter still likes her more. Hearing that, I instantly understood. Chase was doing this on purpose. Because at the birthday banquet 2 days ago, Carter had confessed his love on the spot before realizing he had the wrong girl. It made Riley a laughingstock in their social circles. So, to get on Riley's good side, these people were purposely kicking me while I was down. How childish. I mocked internally, though my gaze shifted to a girl sitting in the crowd. My former best friend, Mia. In my past life, her family went bankrupt right before I was exposed as a fake heiress. They sold all their real estate just to barely cover their debts and had to move to a different city. Later, even after the true heiress scandal broke, I was allowed to stay with the Sterlings, though my allowance was slashed in half. Even then, I gave half of that money to Mia to help her family survive their darkest days, because she was my one and only best friend. In this life, her family's company unexpectedly received a massive injection of capital. Not only did they avoid bankruptcy, but over the last 2 years, their assets had skyrocketed, nearly matching the Sterlings. Yet, meeting my gaze now, she guiltily shrank back into the sofa, avoiding my eyes. In the end, she didn't speak up to defend me. My expectations slowly turned into sheer disappointment. I opened my mouth, wanting to ask her why, but I found that the words just wouldn't come out. Chloe, are you okay? Seeing my silence, Riley took the initiative to walk over. I'm so sorry, everyone didn't mean to laugh at you. She looked like the perfect, considerate little flower. Logically, this was the part where I was supposed to feel humiliated, drop the drinks, and storm out. Hey, 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 where do you think you're going? Is this how the club trains its staff? Get over here and pour my drink, Chase yelled, looking incredibly smug as he actively picked a fight. Maybe if I'm in a good mood, I'll toss you a couple thousand in tips. Chloe, life must be pretty hard since you left the Sterlings, huh? When I didn't reply, his eyes rolled. And he took it a step further. Perfect timing. My bed has been a little cold lately. You've got a decent face and a killer body. Why don't you just follow me? As his words grew increasingly vulgar, the rest of the room put on faces eager for a good show. Only Riley frowned slightly, just as she was about to speak. Bang! The VIP door was kicked open. Carter, who had arrived late, stood in the doorway with a face like thunder. Under everyone's stunned gazes, he stormed into the room. He stopped dead in front of Chase, his eyes sharp as daggers. Gritting his teeth, he asked, word by word, who exactly did you just say had a decent face? For a split second, the room was terrifyingly quiet. Even I was a little surprised. Carter liked peace and quiet. Unless he was following me around, he rarely set foot in places like this. See Carter, bro. Chase hadn't expected Carter to show up. His legs instantly turned to jelly. I was just joking. In front of Carter, he didn't dare act tough.
Oh.
Carter tilted his head, his face completely devoid of emotion. Who gave you the nerve to joke with her? At that moment, another wealthy heir who used to be close with Carter stepped up to smooth things over. Come on, Carter. We all know you and Chloe used to be close. But she's not one of us anymore. We all grew up together. There's no need to ruin the vibe over her. Before he could finish, Carter cut him off. Oh, so you do remember we all grew up together? He glared at the guy, then swept his icy gaze across the varying expressions in the room. What exactly did she do wrong? Did she ask to be switched at birth? Did she ever do a single thing to wrong any of you? The girl I held on a pedestal like a princess. This is how you treat her. He scowled furiously. Are all of you out of your damn minds? Honestly, it wasn't just Carter. Even having lived 2 lives, I still couldn't understand it. Why did the playmate that grew up with instantly kick me while I was down the second they learned my true identity? Why did the best friend who swore we'd be sisters for life refuse to say a single word for me when I hit rock bottom? It felt as if the world operated on a pre-written code. More than a decade of affection and loyalty vanished into thin air the exact moment the fake heiress label was slapped onto me. From beginning to end, only Carter stood firmly by my side. So, the more he did, the less I wanted him dragged into this mess. But Carter was like a husky off its leash, completely uncontrollable. The rest of the room was too stunned by his screaming to react. The next second, Carter, whose aura had just been 10 feet tall, turned to face me and instantly deflated. Don't be scared. I wasn't yelling at you. He thought for a second, then added, I know swearing is bad. It's a character flaw of mine.
Don't learn from me.
Touching the complex, bewildered looks the others were shooting me. My mouth twitched. I quickly grabbed Carter by the arm and dragged him out of the room. Hey, I wasn't finished. How could they treat you like that? Shut up. It wasn't until we reached the emergency stairwell that I finally turned to look at him. Why are you here? To find you, obviously, he said, looking completely innocent. Didn't I tell you we aren't equals anymore? You don't need to follow me around. Chloe, he interrupted me, looking at me with dead serious eyes. He asked, so, for the past 2 years while I was gone, is this the kind of life you've been living? For the first time since we'd entered the stairwell, I looked away. No, I lied. Carter stared at me silently. Then his gaze dropped. My wrist. The sleeve of my uniform had ridden up while I dragged him out. A dark purple bruise wrapped around my arm. His expression changed instantly. Who did that? It's nothing. Chloe. He said my name quietly this time, but somehow that was scarier than him yelling. I clicked my tongue and tugged my sleeve down. A drunk customer grabbed me last week. The manager handled it already. And you're still working here? I need money to live, Your Highness. His jaw tightened. The emergency stairwell fell silent. Then, very suddenly, Carter took off his suit jacket and shoved it at me. What are you doing? You're cold. I'm not. You lost weight. That's called poverty. You skipped dinner again. I paused. Damn him. He used to follow me around so much as a kid that he knew all my habits better than I did. Whenever I lied, my ears turned red. Whenever I was upset, I'd pretend to joke around. Whenever I skipped meals, I got irritable. Carter inhaled slowly, like he was trying very hard not to explode. You promised me, he said hoarsely. You promised you'd wait for me. I laughed lightly. And you promised to study hard abroad. Did you? I graduated early. You freak. I came back immediately after. His eyes were fixed on me from beginning to end. Chloe, he said, I worked myself to death for 2 years because I wanted to come back faster. Something in my chest twisted painfully. So, I deliberately said the cruelest thing possible. That's your problem. The air froze. I expected him to get angry. Instead, he lowered his head and laughed softly. You really are terrible. Thanks. But I still like you. In fact, he continued calmly, I think I like you even more now. I stared at him like he was insane. Have you finally snapped? You sold me 2 terrible corn dogs and charged me double. Then you dragged me into a stairwell and verbally abused me. He looked completely sincere. My feelings deepened. I was speechless. This man was hopeless. Suddenly,
Buzz.
My phone vibrated. The moment I saw the caller ID, my expression changed slightly. It was the hospital. I immediately picked up. Hello. Miss Chloe? Your grandmother's surgery fee still hasn't been fully paid. If the remaining balance isn't settled by tomorrow morning. I know, I interrupted quickly. I'll handle it tonight. After hanging up, I turned around, only to see Carter staring at me. Your grandmother?
Damn.
In my previous life, after being exposed as a fake heiress, I completely lost my mind trying to fight Riley. I never noticed that the elderly woman who raised me in the countryside before I was brought back to the Sterlings had gotten sick. By the time I found out, it was too late. This time, the first thing I did after leaving the Sterling family was find her. The surgery fees had drained nearly all my savings, which was why I was working 3 jobs. I didn't want pity from anyone, especially not Carter. So I immediately said, it has nothing to do with you. But the moment the words left my mouth, Carter suddenly stepped forward. Then,
he hugged me.
I froze. I knew it, he whispered quietly. His arms tightened around me carefully, like he was terrified I'd disappear. You kept pushing me away because you were suffering alone again. The warmth of his body nearly shattered the emotional wall I'd spent 2 entire lifetimes building. So I shoved him hard. Don't act like this. He stumbled back half a step but refused to let go of my wrist. Why not? Because I don't want to owe you anything anymore. At that, Carter went completely still. A few seconds later, he suddenly laughed. A dangerous laugh. Too late. My eyelid twitched instinctively. Every time Carter smiled like that, someone was about to suffer. Sure enough, he calmly pulled out his phone in front of me. Then he made a call. Hello, he said mildly. Grandpa. A bad feeling instantly rose in my chest. The people in Cloud Club insulted your future granddaughter-in-law tonight. Carter Vance. I'm very upset, he continued smoothly. Also, transfer the ownership documents for my downtown apartment to Chloe tomorrow. I nearly died on the spot. Are you insane? On the other end of the call, old Master Vance's delighted laughter practically burst through the speaker. Finally succeeded? Excellent. As expected of my grandson. Not yet, Carter replied coldly. Still chasing. Useless brat. Need Grandpa to teach you? I'll handle it myself. Then he hung up. I stared at him in disbelief. You. Now you owe me an apartment, he said calmly. I can return it. Then I'll give you another one. Carter. He suddenly leaned closer. His eyes were slightly red again, stubborn and intense. In my last life, he said softly, I failed to protect you. My entire body froze. The stairwell became deathly silent. Our eyes met. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I asked slowly, "You remember too?" Carter's throat bobbed once. Then he smiled bitterly. "The moment I woke up overseas and realized you'd pushed me away on purpose." He looked at me quietly. "I guessed you probably remembered too." For a long time, neither of us moved. Then very suddenly I laughed. A real laugh. Not the fake, careless kind I'd worn ever since my rebirth. "I knew it," I muttered. There was no way someone could naturally grow into this level of love-struck idiot. Carter looked relieved for the first time all night. Then he lowered his head and rested his forehead lightly against mine. "So," he asked softly, "this time can you stop abandoning me?" My breathing hitched slightly. For a moment, the stairwell was so quiet I could hear the muffled bass from the club downstairs. Carter waited patiently. That was the terrifying thing about him. The Vance heir had been spoiled since childhood. Everyone in our circle knew he was arrogant, aloof, impossible to approach. Yet all of his patience had somehow been spent on me. In both lives. I looked away first. "I'm thinking about it." Carter instantly smiled. It was dazzling. Disgustingly dazzling. I kicked his shin on reflex. "Why are you smiling already?" "Because you didn't reject me." "That doesn't mean I agreed. But there's hope now." I stared at him for 2 seconds before muttering, "Hopeless." He looked even happier after being insulted. Absolute psychopath. Just then, the stairwell door burst open. "Carter, what the hell was that earlier?" Chase's furious voice cut off the second he saw us, standing close together. More specifically, saw Carter holding my hand. The expression on Chase's face immediately became extremely colorful. Behind him stood several others from the private room, including Riley and Mia. An awkward silence spread instantly. Carter's mood visibly worsened the moment he saw them. Like a dog protecting food, he moved half a step in front of me. I almost rolled my eyes. Meanwhile, Riley looked between the two of us quietly. Then she suddenly spoke. "You both remember, don't you?" This time it was my turn to freeze. Even Carter's expression changed slightly. Riley lowered her gaze and laughed self-deprecatingly. "I knew it." No one spoke. Then she continued softly. "Actually, I remembered before either of you." My scalp tingled. In my previous life, Riley had always seemed like the ultimate winner. Beloved family. Perfect marriage. 3 adorable children. An untouchable position in the Sterling family. But now, standing in front of us, she looked strangely exhausted. "I spent my whole first life wondering why everyone hated Chloe so much," she said quietly. The corridor fell silent. In the beginning, I really did want to get along with her. Her eyes turned slightly red. But no matter what Chloe did, people automatically blamed her for everything. I said one sentence, and everyone praised me for being kind. She said one sentence, and everyone called her arrogant. Riley laughed bitterly. It felt like the world itself was forcing us into certain roles. My fingers curled slightly. Because she was right. That strange, invisible script had existed in both our lives. The fake heiress had to become vicious. The true heiress had to become beloved. And Carter had to become the tragic male lead who lost everything for love. In my last life, Riley continued softly, I broke off my engagement to Carter because I knew he loved Chloe. Chase and the others stared blankly, completely unable to understand what we were talking about anymore. But after that, Riley paused. Things became strange. Her face turned pale. The man I married wasn't normal. A chill suddenly ran down my spine. Because in my previous life, Riley's marriage had looked perfect from the outside. The powerful husband, the wealthy household, the triplets, the endless luxury. It was the textbook happy ending.
But now,
Riley whispered tremblingly. He monitored everything I did. He decided what I wore. He isolated me from my friends. He controlled my phone, my schedule, my diet, everything. He kept saying it was because he loved me. Her voice cracked. Even my children were terrified of him. The stairwell became dead silent. I suddenly remembered something. In my previous life, near the end, there had been rumors. Rumors that the true head of the dance family was frighteningly possessive toward his wife. Rumors that Riley rarely appeared in public after marriage. Rumors that her smile looked increasingly forced. But because she was the female lead, everyone automatically assumed she was happy.
Including me.
Riley wiped her eyes and looked at me. When I died, I realized something. What? She smiled weakly. The only person in that entire stupid story who ever treated me sincerely was you. I froze. In my first life, she continued, even while fighting me, you warned me multiple times not to marry him. You never listened. I didn't. Riley lowered her head guiltily. Because everyone around me kept saying he was perfect. That was true too. Back then, nobody would have believed me over the powerful head of the dance family. The atmosphere turned complicated instantly. Meanwhile, Chase and the others looked utterly horrified. Probably because this conversation sounded like four ghosts discussing spoilers for a drama. Finally, Mia suddenly stepped forward shakily. Chloe. I looked at her calmly. Her eyes reddened almost immediately. In my previous life, she whispered, my family really did go bankrupt. I said nothing. I wanted to help you, she said tearfully. But after you were sent to the psychiatric hospital, my parents warned me not to get involved with you anymore. Her voice became smaller and smaller. So you abandoned me. Mia's face turned white instantly. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the problem. After dying once already, some wounds no longer felt sharp enough to hurt. Mia burst into tears. I'm sorry. I looked at her quietly for a few seconds.
Lenny sight.
You know, I said lightly, in my previous life, right before I died, I kept wondering why. Why did everyone suddenly stop loving me? Why did it feel like the entire world turned against me overnight? No one dared speak. Then I smiled faintly. But after being reborn, I figured it out. I looked toward Riley. Because the moment the true heroine appeared, the fake one became unnecessary. The air grew still. But this time, I slowly grabbed Carter's sleeve. I don't really feel like following the script anymore. Carter immediately held my hand tightly. His eyes practically lit up. Golden Retriever.
Confirmed.
Behind us, Chase looked like his worldview had completely shattered. Wait, he said blankly. So all of us are reborn? No, Carter replied coldly. Then he pulled me closer possessively and added, only the important characters. Chase looked deeply offended. What the hell does that mean? It means, I said kindly, you're an NPC. The others burst out laughing instantly. Even Riley covered her mouth. Chase's face turned green. You. Enough, Carter said lazily. You made my girlfriend cry earlier. I haven't settled that score yet. The entire stairwell went silent. I blinked. Girlfriend? Carter froze too. For the first time all night, the mighty heir of the Vance family looked genuinely nervous. Very slowly, he turned toward me. Can I say that yet? Everyone stared at me, including Riley, including Mia, including Chase, who looked like he was witnessing the collapse of civilization. I looked at Carter's cautious expression and suddenly remembered something from our childhood. Back then, whenever I got into trouble, Carter would stand in front of me exactly like this. Even if he was scared too. Even if he got punished with me afterward. In both lifetimes, he had never once let go of my hand. So this time, I intertwined our fingers properly. You already announced it to your grandfather, I muttered. What's the point of asking now? For a full 3 seconds, Carter completely stopped functioning. Then his ears turned bright red. Riley immediately laughed. Wow, she said. The great Carter Vance can blush? Shut up. He looks like he's about to ascend to heaven. Riley. Meanwhile, Chase looked like he wanted to jump off the building. That night, everything changed. The next morning, the Cloud Club publicly fired the manager who allowed guests to harass employees. Chase's father personally dragged him to apologize to me. Apparently, old Master Vance had been slightly displeased. By slightly displeased, I meant half their business partnerships mysteriously disappeared overnight. Terrifying old man. As for Mia, She came to find me several times after that. In the end, we sat together at a cheap noodle shop and talked honestly for the first time in 2 lifetimes. I really did care about you, she whispered tearfully. I know, but I was weak. I know that too. Some friendships survive betrayal. Others don't. Mia and I never became inseparable best friends again, but eventually, we became something gentler. People who once truly cared for each other. Sometimes that was enough. Meanwhile, Riley completely overturned her previous fate. This time, she rejected the dance family patriarch before he could even approach her. According to rumors, the terrifying man sat silently in his office for an entire day after hearing the rejection. Then, he calmly bought the company Riley worked at. Riley immediately fled overseas overnight. When she called me crying from the airport, I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. You laughed too early, she sobbed. He bought the airline too. In the end, she escaped by hiding inside Carter's private jet. The two family heads nearly went to war afterward. As for me, I finally stopped living like I was waiting for tragedy to happen. I reopened the small dessert shop my grandmother once dreamed of owning. It wasn't large, just a warm little shop tucked beside a quiet street. But every morning, sunlight filled the windows, and the air smelled sweet. My grandmother recovered well after surgery and became the shop's honorary cashier. Mostly because she liked gossiping with customers. And Carter practically moved in. The elegant young heir who once looked out of place eating corn dogs at a night market now sat at my counter daily in $1,000 suits, seriously helping package strawberry cakes. Sometimes customers secretly took pictures of him. Online, rumors spread wildly. Why is the Vance heir working part-time at a dessert shop? Is this some rich people hobby? Wait, he's actually handsome. One afternoon, while I was decorating cakes, a little girl suddenly tugged my sleeve. Big sister, she whispered. Is that prince over there your husband? Behind the counter, Carter immediately looked up. I almost laughed seeing how obvious his anticipation was. So I deliberately answered slowly. Not yet. His expression instantly dimmed. Pathetic. The little girl nodded seriously. Then you should marry him quickly. Why? Because he looks like he'll cry if you don't. I burst out laughing. Behind me, Carter sighed helplessly. That winter, during the first snowfall of the year, he proposed. No grand banquet. No reporters. No absurd fireworks. Just the two of us closing the shop together late at night. Snow drifted softly outside the windows. My hands were still dusted with flour when Carter suddenly grabbed them. His eyes were red again. Honestly, this man cried more than me across 2 lifetimes. Chloe, he said quietly, this time can we grow old together? For a moment, I looked at him silently. Then I remembered. The arrogant little boy who used to follow me everywhere. The teenager who crossed oceans just because I asked him to. The man who lost everything trying to save me. The fool who loved me in 2 different lifetimes without ever regretting it. In the end, I smiled. And finally gave him the answer he had waited 2 lifetimes to hear. Okay. Outside, snow fell quietly. Inside the warm little dessert shop, Carter hugged me so tightly it felt like he was holding on to an entire lost lifetime. And this time, neither of us let go.